Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the starship Meridian, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger in the viewport. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the railing. At 25, she had commanded entire fleets across 3 star systems. But the thought of walking into a coffee shop and ordering a simple drink made her stomach twist with anxiety. The war had ended 2 years ago. The Zephyrian Empire, which had threatened to wipe out humanity, now existed only in history books and memorial walls. Sarah had been instrumental in their defeat, earning her place as the youngest fleet admiral in human history. She had been just 8 years old when the war began, and by 15 she was commanding battleships. By 18, entire armadas followed her orders without question. But now, returning to Earth for the first time since she was a child, Sarah faced her greatest challenge yet, learning how to be human again. The ship's communications officer approached her cautiously. Lieutenant Morrison had served under her command for 3 years, and he knew better than most how brilliant she was in battle. He also knew how she struggled with the simplest social interactions. "Admiral, we'll be docking at Terra Station in 2 hours, Morrison said gently. The welcome ceremony will begin at 1400 hours. Sarah nodded without turning around. How many people will be there? Approximately 10,000, ma'am. Representatives from all the colonies, media crews, and civilian crowds. Sarah's breathing quickened. 10,000 people, 10,000 faces staring at her, expecting speeches and smiles and handshakes. In space, she could coordinate the movements of 100 ships while under enemy fire, calculating trajectories and battle strategies in her head faster than most computers. But the thought of making small talk with strangers made her feel sick. "Morrison," she said quietly, "when you're at home on leave, how do you talk to people? Regular people, I mean." Morrison looked surprised by the question. "Well, ma'am, you just talk about normal things. The weather, sports, what you had for breakfast. But what if they ask about the war? Then you tell them what you're comfortable sharing." Sarah finally turned to face him. Morrison was shocked to see uncertainty in her eyes. This was the same woman who had stared down Zephyrian dreadnoughts without flinching, who had made split-second decisions that saved millions of lives. "I've been thinking about something," Sarah said. "During the Battle of Proxima, when we were surrounded by their fleet, I knew exactly what to do. I could see every possible move, every counter-strategy. But yesterday, when that new ensign asked me if I wanted to join the crew for movie night, I just froze. I didn't know what to say." Morrison realized something that had never occurred to him before. Sarah had been pulled from her family at age 8, when her tactical genius was discovered. She had spent her entire childhood and teenage years on military ships, surrounded by officers and soldiers who treated her with the respect due to a commanding officer. She had never learned how to just be a regular person. "Ma'am, if I may ask, what are you planning to do after the ceremony?" Sarah looked back out at Earth. "I'm going to try to find my parents. I haven't seen them since I was 8. They've been writing to me, but..." She trailed off. "But how do you hug someone you barely remember? How do you sit at a dinner table and pretend you're still their little girl, when you've seen things that would give them nightmares for the rest of their lives?" Morrison felt a deep sadness for his admiral. She had sacrificed her childhood to save humanity, and now she was struggling with the most basic human connections that most people took for granted. "Maybe," he suggested carefully, "you don't have to pretend to be their little girl. Maybe you can just be their daughter who's grown up. They've been following your career, ma'am. They're proud of you." Sarah considered this. "In battle, I always knew the objective. Defeat the enemy, protect the fleet, complete the mission. But what's the objective here? What am I supposed to accomplish by going home?" "Maybe there isn't an objective, ma'am. Maybe you're just supposed to live." The word live hung in the air between them. Sarah had spent so many years focused on survival, on strategy, on war, that the concept of simply living seemed foreign to her. As Terra Station came into view, Sarah made a decision. She would face this challenge the same way she had faced every other obstacle in her life, with courage and determination. She had learned to command fleets and win impossible battles. Surely she could learn to have a conversation with her own parents. But deep down, she suspected this might be the hardest battle she had ever fought. The welcome ceremony was a nightmare wrapped in patriotic music and thunderous applause. Sarah stood on the platform in her dress uniform, medals weighing heavy on her chest as speaker after speaker praised her tactical brilliance and unwavering courage. The crowd cheered every mention of her greatest victories, and cameras flashed constantly. But all Sarah could focus on was how her collar felt too tight and how the microphone amplified every small sound she made. When it was finally her turn to speak, she approached the podium with the same steady gait she used when boarding an enemy ship. But inside her heart was racing. "Citizens of Earth," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the plaza. The words came easily at first because they were familiar, formal, the kind of thing she had said in military briefings countless times. She spoke of duty, of sacrifice, of the brave men and women who had fought alongside her. But then someone in the crowd shouted, "Tell us about the kids on Kepler 442b. How did you save them?" Sarah's mind went blank. The Battle of Kepler 442b had been one of her most desperate moments. The Zephyrians had been using human children as shields, forcing her to make an impossible choice. She had found a solution, but the memory of those terrified faces still haunted her dreams. Sarah started, then stopped. The crowd waited. The cameras rolled. She could feel sweat forming under her uniform despite the cool air. The children were brave, she finally managed. Braver than any soldier, it wasn't enough. She could see the disappointment in some faces, the confusion in others. They wanted stories of heroism and glory. But all Sarah could think about were the nightmares that followed every battle, the weight of every decision that cost lives even when it saved more. After the ceremony, Sarah was escorted through a receiving line that seemed to stretch forever. Dignitaries shook her hand and said things like "tremendous honor" and "hero of humanity," but their words bounced off her like armor plating. She smiled when she was supposed to, and nodded at the right moments, but she felt like she was watching someone else's life. Then she saw them. Her parents stood near the end of the line, and Sarah's carefully maintained composure almost cracked. Her mother had gray hair now, and her father looked smaller than she remembered, but their eyes were the same. They were crying. When Sarah reached them, protocol demanded she maintain military bearing, but her mother ignored all of that and pulled her into a fierce hug. For a moment, Sarah stood rigid, unsure of what to do with her arms. Then slowly she hugged back. "My baby," her mother whispered. "My brave, brilliant baby." Sarah wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. She wasn't a baby anymore. She wasn't even sure she was still their daughter in any meaningful way. The 8-year-old girl they remembered had disappeared into war strategies and command decisions years ago. Her father stepped forward and saluted her, which made Sarah's heart break a little. "Admiral," he said formally, then his voice cracked. "Sarah." "Dad," she managed. An aide appeared at Sarah's elbow. "Admiral, the transport to your quarters is ready." Sarah looked between her parents and the aide. This was it. This was where she was supposed to know what to do, but she felt as lost as she had during her first space battle. "Would you—" she started, then stopped. In meetings with alien diplomats, she could negotiate trade agreements and peace treaties, but asking her own parents to have dinner with her seemed impossible. Her mother seemed to understand. "Would you like to come home with us tonight? Just for dinner? Your old room is exactly the same." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. As they walked toward the civilian transport area, her father asked, "How are you doing, sweetheart?" Really doing? It was such a simple question, but Sarah realized no one had asked her that in years. People asked about fleet status, mission parameters, strategic assessments, but no one asked how she was doing. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I know how to fight wars, but I don't know how to—" This. She gestured vaguely at the normal people walking past them, going about their regular lives. "Well," her mother said, taking her arm, "maybe we can figure it out together." As they rode the transport toward the suburbs, Sarah watched the city pass by through the window. Everything looked so peaceful, so normal. Children played in parks while their parents watched. Couples walked hand in hand down tree-lined streets. People sat at outdoor cafes laughing and talking about things that had nothing to do with tactical formations or casualty reports. Sarah realized she had no idea how to be part of that world. She was a stranger in the very civilization she had fought to protect. Her mother seemed to sense her thoughts. "You know, when you were little, you used to arrange all your toys in perfect formations. Even your stuffed animals had to be in the right positions before you could fall asleep." "I remember that," Sarah said quietly. "We always knew you were special, but we never imagined—" her mother's voice trailed off, "that I'd become a weapon." Sarah finished. "That you'd become our salvation," her father corrected gently. Sarah looked at her reflection in the transport window. She saw a young woman in a military uniform covered with medals for battles fought before she was old enough to vote. She had saved humanity, but somewhere along the way, she had lost herself. The transport pulled up to a modest house with a small garden in front. It looked exactly like Sarah remembered, except smaller somehow. "Welcome home," her mother said. Sarah stared at the front door, knowing that walking through it would be harder than storming any enemy fortress. On the other side of that door was the life she might have had, the girl she might have been, and the family she barely knew how to love anymore. But she had never backed down from a challenge before, and she wasn't going to start now. The house smelled like cinnamon and old books, triggering memories Sarah thought she had lost forever. Her mother led her through rooms that felt like museum exhibits of her childhood. Everything was exactly where she remembered it. The crack in the living room wall from when she had tried to move furniture with her mind after watching too many science fiction movies. The height marks on the kitchen door frame that stopped at age 8. Her collection of model spaceships still displayed on the mantel. "We never changed anything," her father explained, noticing her expression. "We always hoped you'd come home." Sarah picked up one of the model ships, a sleek fighter that had been her favorite. She remembered spending hours imagining herself as the pilot, flying through space on grand adventures. She had gotten her wish, but the reality had been nothing like her 8-year-old dreams. "Dinner will be ready in a few minutes," her mother called from the kitchen. "Why don't you go up and see your room?" Sarah climbed the familiar stairs, her hand trailing along the banister. Each step felt heavier than the last. At the top, she pushed open the door to her childhood bedroom and stopped in the doorway. It was like stepping back in time. The bed was still covered with the same space-themed comforter. Her old books lined the shelves, adventure stories and fairy tales and picture books about brave princesses and daring knights. Posters of planets and star charts covered the walls. On the desk sat her old journal, pink with silver stars, where she used to write stories about exploring the galaxy. Sarah sat on the bed and opened the journal to a random page. In her 8-year-old handwriting, she had written, "Today I dreamed I was captain of the biggest spaceship ever. We flew to new worlds and met aliens, and everyone was friends. When I grow up, I want to bring peace to the whole universe." She almost laughed at the irony. She had brought peace to the universe, but through war and destruction, not friendship and exploration. The little girl who had written those words could never have imagined the reality of command, the sleepless nights, the impossible decisions, the weight of knowing that millions of lives depended on every choice she made. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Sarah, dinner's ready." The dining room table was set for 3 with her parents' best dishes and cloth napkins. Her mother had made all of Sarah's childhood favorites: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, and apple pie for dessert. It was the kind of home-cooked meal Sarah hadn't had in 17 years. "This looks amazing," Sarah said, and meant it. Her parents beamed like she had just awarded them medals. They sat down, and her father reached for her hand. "We always say grace before dinner." Sarah hesitated. She couldn't remember the last time she had prayed. On the battlefield, she had made her own miracles through strategy and determination. But she took her parents' hands and bowed her head. "Thank you for bringing our daughter home safe," her father said simply. During dinner, they tried to catch up on 17 years of separation. Her parents told her about their jobs, their friends, the neighbors she might remember. They showed her pictures on their tablets, birthdays and holidays and family gatherings she had missed. They had kept a place for her at every celebration, an empty chair that reminded everyone she was still part of the family. "Tell us about space," her mother said. "What's it really like out there?" Sarah started to give them the sanitized version, the one she used in interviews and official reports. But looking at their faces, she realized they genuinely wanted to know. So she told them about the beauty of nebulae seen from a ship's viewport, about alien sunsets on distant worlds, about the strange music that solar winds made when they hit a ship's hull just right. "It sounds wonderful," her father said. "Some of it was," Sarah admitted. "Between the battles, there were moments of incredible beauty. I've seen things that no human had ever seen before. Binary stars dancing around each other like cosmic ballet, ice crystals forming on the observation deck windows when we passed through a comet's tail. Whole civilizations of peaceful aliens who just wanted to trade stories and songs." "And the other parts?" her mother asked gently. Sarah's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "The other parts. The parts that woke her up screaming some nights. The parts that made her afraid to close her eyes sometimes. The other parts were necessary, she said finally. Her parents exchanged a look. Sweetheart, her mother said carefully, you don't have to be strong all the time. Not here. Yes, I do, Sarah said automatically. If I'm not strong, people die. The war is over, her father reminded her. Is it? Sarah set down her fork. There are still Zephyrian holdouts in the outer systems. Pirates using stolen alien technology. 3 different species asking for Earth's help with their own conflicts. The universe is still dangerous. But you don't have to fix all of it, her mother said. Sarah stared at her. If not me, then who? I'm the only one who understands their tactics, their technology. I'm the only one who's proven I can beat them. You're also the only one who was a child when this started, her father said quietly. You never had a chance to learn that it's okay to let other people handle things sometimes. Sarah felt something tight in her chest, like a knot she hadn't realized was there. I tried to retire after the war ended. I lasted 6 weeks. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every night I would lie awake thinking about all the things that could go wrong, all the threats that no one else was watching for. I kept a tactical display running on my bedroom wall because the silence felt wrong. Oh, honey, her mother whispered. I don't know how to not be Admiral Chen, Sarah continued. I don't know how to just be Sarah. I look in the mirror and I see this person who's done terrible things for good reasons, who sacrificed everything for a cause, and I don't know who she is when the cause is gone. Her parents were quiet for a long moment, then her father reached across the table and took her hand. Maybe, he said, we can help you figure out who Sarah is now, not the little girl who left and not just Admiral Chen, but the woman who came home. Sarah looked around the table at these 2 people who had loved her unconditionally for 25 years. Even when she was a stranger, even when they only knew her through news reports and official communications, for the first time since the war ended, she felt like maybe there was hope for something more than just survival. I'd like that, she said quietly. I really would. The next morning, Sarah woke up in her childhood bed for the first time in 17 years. For a moment, she was completely disoriented. No ship vibrations, no red alert lights, no morning briefings scheduled in her mental calendar. Just sunlight streaming through familiar curtains and the sound of birds singing outside her window. She had slept for 9 hours straight without waking up once. It was the longest uninterrupted sleep she'd had since the war began. Downstairs, she found her parents having breakfast and reading the news on their tablets. They looked up when she entered, and her mother immediately started bustling around the kitchen. What would you like for breakfast, dear? Eggs, pancakes? I could make that fruit salad you used to love. Coffee would be fine, Sarah said, sitting down at the table. Coffee is not breakfast, her mother said firmly, in the same tone she had used when Sarah was 8 and tried to eat candy for breakfast. Sarah almost smiled. I haven't eaten real breakfast in years. Usually just nutrition bars and coffee while reviewing tactical reports. Her father looked up from his tablet. Well, you're not reviewing tactical reports today. Today you're learning how to be on vacation. I don't know how to be on vacation. Neither did we when we retired, her mother said, setting a plate of eggs and toast in front of Sarah. Your father nearly drove me crazy the first month. He kept trying to organize the garage like it was a military supply depot. It was very efficiently organized, her father protested. Sarah ate slowly, savoring the taste of real eggs instead of the synthetic protein she was used to. What do people do on vacation? Whatever they want, her mother said. Sleep late, read books, watch movies, visit friends, go for walks. Normal things, normal things. Sarah tried to imagine herself doing normal things, but it felt like trying to imagine herself with wings. I was thinking I should check in with command. Make sure they don't need me for anything urgent. Both her parents gave her identical looks of parental disapproval. No, her father said firmly. You are on leave. Official leave, which means no checking in with anyone. But what if something happens? Then someone else will handle it, her mother said. The human race managed to survive for thousands of years before you came along, sweetie. I think we can manage for a few weeks. After breakfast, her mother suggested they go into town. Just to walk around, maybe do some shopping. You could use some civilian clothes. Sarah looked down at her uniform. She had others in her travel bag, but she couldn't remember the last time she had worn anything else. I don't really know what kind of clothes to buy. Then we'll figure it out together. The town had changed since Sarah was 8, but the main street still had the same cozy feeling she remembered. They walked past shops and cafes, and Sarah noticed people pointing and whispering. Word had spread quickly that Admiral Chen was home. "Does that bother you?" her mother asked, noticing Sarah's discomfort. "I'm used to being stared at," Sarah said, "but usually it's by enemy commanders or my own officers, not by people buying groceries." They stopped at a clothing store, and Sarah found herself completely overwhelmed by the choices. Dresses, casual pants, sweaters, and dozens of colors and styles. She was used to uniforms where every detail had a specific purpose and regulation. "Try this," her mother said, holding up a simple blue sweater. "It matches your eyes." Sarah took the sweater into the changing room and stared at herself in the mirror. Without her uniform, she looked younger somehow, more like the person she might have been if the war had never happened. But she also looked lost, like she was wearing a costume for a play she didn't understand. While they were shopping, a young woman approached them hesitantly. She looked to be about Sarah's age, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Admiral Chen?" Sarah tensed automatically, her hand moving instinctively to where her sidearm would normally be. "Yes. I just wanted to thank you," the woman continued. "My brother was one of the Marines you evacuated from Titan Station. He probably wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for you." Sarah remembered Titan Station. It had been a nightmare of close-quarters combat and collapsing corridors. She had managed to get most of the personnel out, but not all of them. She always remembered the ones she couldn't save more clearly than the ones she could. "I was just doing my job," Sarah said quietly. "No," the woman said firmly. "You saved my family. That's not just a job." After the woman left, Sarah's mother noticed her distant expression. "You did something incredible, Sarah. You don't have to minimize it." "Every decision I made cost lives," Sarah said. "Even the good ones. Even the ones that saved more people than they killed. I carry the weight of every person who died because I chose one strategy over another." Her mother stopped walking and turned to face her. "And you also carry the weight of every person who lived because of those same decisions. Millions of people, Sarah. Entire worlds full of families who get to wake up every morning because you made the hard choices." They continued shopping, and slowly, Sarah began to relax. She chose simple clothes, jeans, sweaters, a few dresses that her mother insisted were perfect for her. It felt strange to think about what she liked rather than what was practical or regulation compliant. At lunch, they sat at a sidewalk cafe, and Sarah watched the normal flow of everyday life around her. Parents pushing strollers, teenagers laughing with friends, elderly couples sharing newspapers. It was the world she had fought to protect, but being part of it felt foreign. "I keep expecting something to go wrong," she admitted to her mother. "Every loud noise makes me think it's an attack alarm. When that speeder backfired earlier, I almost dove for cover." "That's normal," her mother said gently. "Your father was in the civilian defense forces during the early years of the war. He had the same reactions when it was over, but he adjusted. It took time and help. There are people who specialize in helping soldiers transition back to civilian life." Sarah bristled slightly. "I don't need therapy. Everyone needs help sometimes, dear. Even brilliant admirals." That afternoon, they visited Sarah's old school. It had been converted into a memorial and museum dedicated to the war, with entire sections devoted to Sarah's campaigns. Seeing her childhood playground turned into a monument to her military career felt surreal. "Ms. Patterson still teaches here," her mother said, pointing to an elderly woman supervising a group of children. "She was your third-grade teacher." Ms. Patterson looked older and frailer, but her eyes lit up when she saw Sarah. "Sarah Chen. My goodness, look at you. Hello, Ms. Patterson." "I always knew you were destined for something special," the teacher said. "Even in third grade, you could solve problems that stumped children twice your age. But I never imagined—" She gestured at the museum displays around them. "I never imagined it either," Sarah said honestly. As they walked home that evening, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years: contentment. Not the satisfaction of a successful mission or the relief of surviving another battle, but simple contentment. For one day, she had been just Sarah, not Admiral Chen. She had bought clothes because she liked them, eaten food because it tasted good, and talked to people without calculating tactical advantages. "Thank you," she said to her mother as they reached the house. "For what?" "For reminding me that there's more to life than war." Her mother hugged her tightly. There's so much more, sweetheart, and we have all the time in the world to show you. 3 weeks into her leave, Sarah was making progress. She could sleep through the night most of the time now, and she had started reading fiction books again instead of tactical manuals. Her parents had introduced her to their friends, and while conversations were still awkward, they were getting easier. Then everything changed. Sarah was in the garden, trying to learn how to grow tomatoes, when her personal communicator chirped with an urgent message. She had promised her parents she wouldn't check work communications, but the priority level of this message was higher than anything she had seen since the war ended. The holographic display showed Admiral Martinez, her former second-in-command, looking haggard and desperate. Sarah, I know you're on leave, but we have a situation. The consortium has made contact. Sarah's blood ran cold. The consortium was a collection of alien species that made the Zephyrians look like peaceful neighbors. They were rumored to consume entire civilizations, not just conquer them. How long? She asked. Their advanced scouts were detected at the edge of our galaxy yesterday. Based on their previous movements, our analysts estimate we have 6 months before the main fleet arrives. Sarah was already calculating fleet positions and defensive strategies in her head. What's our current military strength? 40% of pre-war levels. Most of our experienced commanders are either dead or retired. Sarah, I've been trying to coordinate a defense strategy for 18 hours and I can't see a way to win this. We need you. Sarah closed her eyes. She had known this day would come eventually. Peace never lasted long in the galaxy. I'll be there tomorrow, she said. Sarah, thank you. You're our only hope. The hologram faded, leaving Sarah alone in the garden with dirt under her fingernails and the weight of the universe settling back onto her shoulders. She found her parents in the kitchen, preparing dinner and talking about plans for the weekend. They looked so normal, so peaceful, so blissfully unaware that everything was about to change again. Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something. They must have heard something in her voice, because they immediately gave her their full attention. There's a new threat, a worse one. I have to go back. Her mother's face crumpled. How long this time? I don't know. Maybe forever. Her father sat down heavily at the kitchen table. We just got you back. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Her mother was crying now, but she was also nodding. Of course you have to go. Of course you do. That's who you are. No, Sarah said fiercely. That's not who I want to be anymore. For 3 weeks I've been learning who I could be. I've been Sarah, not Admiral Chen. I've been your daughter, not humanity's weapon. And I love it. I love this life, but if I don't go, everyone dies. Every person I've learned to care about again. Every normal life I've watched and envied. Every child who should get to grow up in peace instead of war. They all die if I don't go. Her father reached out and took her hand. Then you go. And you win, because that's what you do. I'm scared, Sarah admitted. Not of the fighting. I know how to fight. But I'm scared that when this is over, I won't be able to come back again. I'm scared that Sarah will disappear and only Admiral Chen will be left. Her mother wiped her eyes and stood up. Then we'll just have to make sure that doesn't happen. What do you mean? We're coming with you. Sarah stared at her. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. Not to the front lines, her father clarified, but to wherever you're setting up your command center. Every good admiral needs a support team, right? You don't understand. This won't be like the Zephyrian War. The consortium doesn't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They just consume everything in their path. All the more reason for you to have people around who remind you why you're fighting, her mother said firmly. People who will make sure you don't lose yourself completely. Sarah wanted to argue, but she knew they were right. The hardest part of the last war hadn't been the tactical challenges or even the physical danger. It had been the gradual erosion of her humanity, the slow transformation from a person into a living weapon. Having her parents nearby might be the only thing that could prevent that from happening again. It will be dangerous even at a rear command post, she warned. Sweetheart, her father said gently, we've spent 17 years not knowing if you were alive or dead. Do you really think we're going to let you disappear into another war without us? That evening, Sarah packed her few personal belongings while her parents made arrangements to leave Earth. She folded the civilian clothes they had bought together, wondering if she would ever have a chance to wear them again. Her mother found her sitting on her childhood bed, holding the old journal with the 8-year-old's dreams of bringing peace to the universe. You did bring peace, her mother said, sitting down beside her. For 2 years, the galaxy was peaceful. 2 years isn't very long. It's long enough for millions of children to be born, to take their first steps, to say their first words. It's long enough for couples to fall in love and get married. It's long enough for people to build homes and plant gardens and write books and compose music. 2 years of peace is precious even if it doesn't last forever. Sarah looked at her mother. How do you do it? How do you stay so strong when everything keeps falling apart? Because I have something worth being strong for, her mother said simply. I have you, and you have all of humanity. That's what keeps us going when things get dark. The next morning, as they prepared to leave for the spaceport, Sarah took one last look around her childhood home. She had spent 3 weeks learning to be human again, and now she was walking away from it to become a weapon once more. But this time, she wouldn't be doing it alone. This time, she would have people with her who remembered that underneath the uniform and the tactical brilliance and the burden of command, there was still a person worth saving. As their transport lifted off from Earth, Sarah made herself a promise. She would win this war, just like she had won the last one. But when it was over, she would come home again. And she would remember how to be Sarah. The consortium was coming. But humanity had something they didn't understand. The ability to love, to sacrifice, to fight not just for survival but for the chance to live. And as long as Admiral Sarah Chen remembered that, the galaxy still had hope. The Meridian's war room buzzed with controlled chaos as Sarah studied the holographic displays showing consortium fleet movements. 3 months had passed since she returned to active duty, and the situation was worse than anyone had initially realized. The consortium wasn't just invading. They were systematically harvesting entire star systems, stripping them of all organic and technological resources before moving on. Admiral, we've lost contact with the outer colonies of Kepler 438. Admiral Martinez reported grimly. That's 4 systems in the past month. Sarah stared at the tactical display, her mind automatically calculating trajectories and probable attack vectors. The consortium moved like a plague, consuming everything in their path with terrifying efficiency. Unlike the Zephyrians, who had at least been recognizably similar to humans in their motivations, the consortium was utterly alien. They didn't want territory or resources in any conventional sense. They wanted everything, every life form, every piece of technology, every trace of civilization. How long until they reach the core systems? She asked. At their current rate of advancement, 6 weeks, Martinez replied. 6 weeks to save humanity. 6 weeks to devise a strategy against an enemy that had never been defeated, never even been slowed down in their advance across 3 galaxies. Sarah's parents had set up quarters near the command center, and every evening, she would find them in their small living space, trying to maintain some semblance of normal family life amid the preparations for war. Her mother had established a small kitchen where she cooked real food for anyone who wanted it, and her father had become an unofficial counselor for the younger officers who were struggling with the stress. You look tired, her mother said when Sarah arrived for dinner that evening. I am tired, Sarah admitted, sitting down at their small table. I've been running battle simulations for 12 hours straight, and I can't find a winning scenario. Maybe you're thinking about it wrong, her father suggested. Sarah looked up from her barely touched food. What do you mean? You're approaching this like the Zephyrian War, but this enemy is different. Maybe the solution needs to be different too. I've considered unconventional tactics, hit-and-run attacks, guerrilla warfare, defensive positioning. Nothing works. They're too powerful and too numerous. Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. Sarah, what if winning doesn't mean defeating them in battle? I don't understand. What do you know about the consortium? Really know, not just their military capabilities. Sarah frowned. They're a collective intelligence that consumes other civilizations to expand their knowledge and capabilities. They've been moving across the galaxy for thousands of years. But why? Her father asked. What are they looking for? Sarah paused. It was a question she had never really considered. Military intelligence focused on capabilities and tactics, not motivations. I assume they're driven by some kind of survival instinct or expansion imperative. Every living thing wants something, her mother said. Even the most alien intelligence has to have some kind of goal or purpose. Maybe if you understood what they really wanted, you could find a different way to deal with them. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her parents' words, and the more she considered it, the more she realized they were right. She had been so focused on how to fight the consortium that she had never really tried to understand them. The next morning, she called a meeting with her senior officers and the fleet's xenobiologists and xenopsychologists. "I want to change our approach," she announced. "Instead of focusing solely on military strategy, I want to understand what the consortium actually wants." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the fleet's chief xenopsychologist, looked intrigued. "That's an interesting question, Admiral. Most of our analysis has focused on their methods, not their motivations. What do we know about their behavior patterns?" Dr. Vasquez pulled up several data files. "They're extremely methodical. They don't just destroy civilizations. They study them thoroughly first. They capture individuals from every species they encounter and seem to download their memories and knowledge before processing them. Processing them how? We're not entirely sure. The few survivors we've found describe it as being absorbed into some kind of collective consciousness. The individuals don't die exactly, but they cease to exist as separate entities." Sarah felt a chill. "They're not conquering civilizations. They're collecting them." "That would explain their methodical approach," added Commander Torres, the fleet's intelligence officer. "They're not interested in quick victories. They want to preserve and catalog everything they encounter." "But why?" Sarah asked. "What's the point of all that knowledge if you're just going to keep moving and consuming?" Dr. Vasquez hesitated. "This is purely theoretical. But what if they're searching for something specific? Some particular piece of knowledge or type of civilization?" Sarah's mind was racing. If the consortium was searching for something, then maybe humanity could offer them a trade instead of a fight. "Get me everything we have on consortium communication attempts," she ordered. "Every first contact scenario, every transmission they've sent to other species." It took 2 days of analysis, but they finally found it. Buried in the fragments of communications from dozens of dead civilizations was a pattern. The consortium wasn't randomly consuming species. They were looking for something they called the convergence point. "It seems to be some kind of evolutionary milestone," Dr. Vasquez explained. "Based on their communications with other species, they're searching for a civilization that has achieved perfect unity between individual consciousness and collective purpose." "Like a hive mind?" "No, something more sophisticated. A species that maintains individual identity while sharing collective knowledge and purpose. They believe that such a species holds the key to transcending physical existence." Sarah stared at the data. "And they think that by consuming enough civilizations, they'll eventually find this convergence point? Or create it themselves by combining the best elements of every species they've encountered." That evening, Sarah found her parents in their quarters, reading together on their small couch. It was such a normal, peaceful scene that it made her heart ache. "I think I understand what the consortium wants," she said, sitting down across from them. She explained what they had discovered, and her parents listened with the same attention they had given to her childhood stories about school and friends. "So they're looking for perfect unity," her mother said thoughtfully. "That's actually quite beautiful in a terrible way." "How is mass genocide beautiful?" Sarah asked. "Not the method," her father clarified. "The goal. They want to find a way for all consciousness to exist in harmony. It's just that their idea of harmony involves erasing individual identity." Sarah felt something click in her mind. What if we could show them a different kind of unity? One that doesn't require destroying individuality? "What do you mean?" Sarah stood up, pacing around the small room. "Humanity has something unique. We maintain our individual identities while still being capable of incredible collective action. We can work together, sacrifice for each other, even die for each other, while still remaining fundamentally ourselves. The war proved that," her mother said. "Millions of people from hundreds of different worlds all working together to survive. What if that's what they're looking for?" Sarah said excitedly. "What if humanity is their convergence point and they just don't realize it yet?" Her father smiled. "So instead of fighting them, we invite them to observe us. We show them that what they're looking for already exists." It was the most dangerous gamble Sarah had ever considered, but looking at her parents, seeing the love and hope in their eyes, she realized it might also be the most human thing she could do. Instead of preparing for humanity's last battle, she began preparing for humanity's greatest conversation. The consortium fleet arrived exactly when predicted, a massive swarm of biomechanical ships that blotted out the stars. Sarah stood in the command center of the Meridian, watching the displays show thousands of vessels arranged in perfect formation. Any one of those ships could have destroyed Earth's entire defense fleet during the Zephyrian War. But instead of ordering an attack, Sarah opened a communication channel. Consortium Collective. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Alliance. We request an audience. For several minutes, there was no response. Then the screens filled with an image that made several officers step back in shock. It wasn't a single alien face, but hundreds of them, overlapping and shifting, representing dozens of different species. When it spoke, the voice was a harmonious blend of all the civilizations the consortium had absorbed. Greetings, Admiral Chen. We are aware of your species and your military capabilities. Your resistance will be noted and preserved before your integration. We're not here to resist, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. We're here to offer you something you've been searching for. The shifting faces paused. Explain. You seek what you call the convergence point. A civilization that has achieved unity while maintaining individuality. You believe this holds the key to transcending physical existence. This is accurate. No species encountered has achieved this state. All civilizations discovered are either purely individual or purely collective. Integration continues until convergence is found. Sarah took a deep breath. What if I told you that you found it? What if humanity is what you've been looking for? The faces shifted more rapidly, and Sarah could sense something like excitement in the alien collective. Impossible. Human species shows typical individual-focused behavior patterns. Unity indicators are insufficient. Then observe us, Sarah challenged. Before you make any decisions about integration, spend time studying how we actually function. Not just our military or our technology, but our families, our communities, our willingness to sacrifice for each other while remaining ourselves. There was a long pause. Then, proposal is uninteresting. Observation period will be granted. 67 standard time units. 67 days. Sarah had just bought humanity 2 months to prove they were worth preserving. The consortium established observation posts throughout human space, and their representatives began what they called deep cultural analysis. Sarah had prepared for this by arranging for them to witness humanity at its best. Rescue operations, scientific collaborations, artistic performances, families caring for each other, communities coming together in times of crisis. But she also made sure they saw humanity's struggles and conflicts, because she realized that perfection wasn't what made humans special. It was their ability to choose to do better, to grow, to learn from mistakes while remaining fundamentally themselves. 2 weeks into the observation period, Sarah received an unexpected request. The consortium wanted to observe her specifically. Admiral Chen represents optimal human leadership patterns, the collective explained. Understanding Admiral Chen's decision-making processes may provide insight into human unity mechanisms. So Sarah found herself being shadowed by a consortium observer, a shifting biomechanical entity that recorded everything she did. It followed her through strategy meetings, weapon briefings, and diplomatic sessions. But it also followed her to dinner with her parents. The observer seemed particularly fascinated by these family meals. It recorded every conversation, every gesture of affection, every moment of gentle teasing or shared laughter. Explain the purpose of this gathering, it asked one evening. We're spending time together, Sarah said simply. We care about each other, so we share our day and enjoy each other's company. But no tactical advantage is gained. No resources are exchanged. No survival benefit is achieved. Sarah's mother smiled at the observer. The survival benefit is love, she said. When people know they're loved, they become stronger. They fight harder. They endure more. They hope longer. Love is inefficient, the observer stated. Love is everything, Sarah corrected. Every battle I've won, every impossible situation I've survived, I did it because I was fighting for something I loved. Not just the abstract concept of humanity, but specific people, my parents, my crew members, children I've never met but who deserve a chance to grow up. The observer was quiet for a long moment. Individual motivation based on care for other individuals. Paradoxical. Caring for others should weaken the individual, but in humans it strengthens them. That's the convergence point you've been looking for, Sarah said. We're strongest when we're connected to each other, but we're connected as individuals, not as parts of a collective. Every person in this fleet chose to be here. Every sacrifice made in our wars was made willingly. We achieve unity through choice, not absorption. As the observation period continued, Sarah noticed changes in the consortium observers. They began asking more questions about human relationships, about art and music, about why humans kept pets and told stories and celebrated birthdays. They seemed particularly puzzled by human humor. Explain. The purpose of making others laugh, one observer asked after witnessing a comedy show in the ship's recreation center. Joy. Shared is joy multiplied, Sarah's father explained. When we make each other laugh, we're sharing happiness. It connects us without diminishing any of us. On the 50th day of observation, the collective requested a private meeting with Sarah. She found herself in a room full of the shifting faces of dozens of absorbed civilizations. Admiral Chen, we have observed human behavior extensively. Findings are unexpected. How so? Previous species achieved unity through elimination of individual difference or through complete separation of individual interests. Humans achieve unity while maintaining individual identity. They grow stronger through connection rather than absorption. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Does that mean you understand what we are? We understand that humans represent a previously unknown solution to the convergence paradox. However, integration remains necessary. Sarah's heart sank. Why? Because understanding alone is insufficient. To achieve transcendence, we must become what you are. This requires absorption of human consciousness patterns into the collective. But that would destroy exactly what makes us special, Sarah protested. You can't learn to be individual by destroying individuality. Paradox acknowledged. Solution remains unclear. Sarah stared at the shifting faces, and suddenly she saw something she had missed before. Behind the alien features in the depths of those absorbed eyes, she could see traces of individual consciousness, struggling to maintain some sense of self within the collective. You want to learn to be like us, she said slowly, but you're afraid to let go of control. You're afraid that if you allow true individuality, the collective will fall apart. Collective unity is paramount. Individual consciousness threatens cohesion. Not if it's done willingly, Sarah said. What if instead of absorbing us, you learned from us? What if some of your collective chose to experience individuality while maintaining their connection to the whole? It was a radical suggestion. Sarah was essentially asking the consortium to fundamentally change their nature, to risk everything they had built for the chance to become something new. The faces shifted more rapidly than she had ever seen, and she realized she was witnessing the collective equivalent of intense debate. Finally, they spoke. Proposal carries extreme risk, but potential for true convergence is significant. Trial period will be initiated. Select volunteers from collective will experience individual consciousness while maintaining collective link. Sarah almost collapsed with relief. And humanity? Humanity will serve as teachers. Integration is postponed indefinitely. You will help us learn to be both individual and unified. 6 months later, Sarah stood in her parents' garden on Earth, watching her mother tend to the tomatoes they had tried to grow together. The galaxy was at peace again, but this time it felt different. This time it felt permanent. The consortium had established diplomatic relations with humanity, and the first volunteer individuals had begun the slow process of learning to exist independently while maintaining their connection to the collective. It was working better than anyone had dared to hope. Admiral? Her aide approached with a message tablet. Command is asking about your next assignment. Sarah looked at the tablet, then at her parents, then at the peaceful garden around her. Tell them I'm exactly where I need to be, she said. For the first time in her life, Admiral Sarah Chen was choosing to be just Sarah, and the universe was better for it. She had learned to command fleets as a child, had saved humanity twice, had negotiated peace with beings from beyond the galaxy, but her greatest victory was learning that sometimes the most courageous thing a warrior could do was choose to come home. As she helped her mother harvest tomatoes in the afternoon sun, Sarah realized that she had finally found the perfect balance between duty and love, between Admiral Chen and Sarah, between the woman who could command the stars and the daughter who could share a simple meal with her family. The little girl who had dreamed of bringing peace to the universe had finally succeeded, not through conquest, but through understanding. and for the first time in 17 years, the future looked genuinely hopeful.